Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, That Model Railway Guy, for another rolling stock review. After taking a look at the Hatton's Genesis coaches last week, we're looking at another coach today, and like buses, you wait ages for one to arrive and then two come at once. That said, it's been worth the wait because this is the Dynamometer Car from Rapido, and isn't it just stunning? Okay, a quick note here before we get too far into the video. Since I filmed this, Rapido have recalled these models due to an issue with the lighting. I'll talk about that later on, but I just wanted to say up front that I do know about the issue with the electronics, and this was all filmed before that recall was issued. Okay, now back to the video. So this is a re-release of the original Dynamometer car that Rapido made exclusively for Rails of Sheffield a few years ago. I think that was before the UK branch of Rapido existed, but now Rails of Sheffield have given them permission to do these models again as a general release, and it seems like they've made some upgrades too, which we'll look at in more detail later on. First though, let's talk about the elephant in the room, the price. Yeah, it's high. It's the single most expensive coach I've ever bought and probably ever will. The RRP is £139.86, or if you get it at the retailers, it's more like £118.96, which is what I got mine for. I mean, I have locos that I paid less for, so honestly, this is really going to have to blow everything out of the water to justify this kind of price. That said, it is Rapido, and we know what they're like when it comes to detail and going the extra mile, so I have high expectations for this model anyway. For some people though, that price will just be too much no matter how much detail there is, and that is absolutely understandable. I recognise that I am in a very fortunate position to be able to buy these models to review in videos like this one. For me personally, when these were originally released by Rails of Sheffield, I did decide not to get one, and I always kind of regretted it, so this time I took the plunge, and now it's up to Rapido to show us what they've got, so let's take a closer look, shall we? So the first thing we have to talk about here is the teak effect, which is just wonderful. I usually compare everything to the Hornby LNER teaks, which personally I think are a really good representation of the wood grain effect, and the Dynamometer car will look right at home with them, I think. In fact, I'll be running them together later on, but it's certainly a worthy companion, if not slightly better. The body shape is really cool too, with the way it bows out in the middle of the coach. Presumably this is something to do with the measuring equipment on board, or for staff to get a better look down the train. You can see we also have fantastic lining around all of the panelling too, which is really nice and fine. I believe this was left off on the previous version. I'm not sure if that was a limitation at the time or if Rapido were doing the model based on how it's preserved at the Railway Museum, but either way, it's a very welcome addition here and it looks brilliant. Likewise, the lettering along the coach is amazing too, with it being reproduced in that classic LNER font, and the colours and the shading are absolutely spot on. We also have separately fitted door handles and grab rails too. These are really nice fine parts and are painted to match that lining too, which is great. Moving down, the frames are painted in brown, which is a feature that the LNER coaches tended to have. This is something that's always stood out to me, and so it's great to see that Rapido haven't missed this. Look closely and you'll see there's even rivets and additional printing along the length of this too, as well as sections of pipework. And naturally, we have to talk about the dynamo itself, at least that's what I assume this is. It is just static, so don't expect to see it moving later on during the running session, but the detail on here is really nice. In fact, the whole underside of the coach is filled with additional extra detail, which you can see from various angles, and it shows just how much was going on underneath this coach with all of the measuring devices. And speaking of extra detail, Rapido have also provided a resealable bag with some extra parts to fit yourself if you want to. Most of this is fairly standard things like coupling hooks and additional pipework, but you can see we also have the option of adding the duck kits to the model, and I believe that's for if you want the Dynamometer car to look as it was during Mallard's speed record run. Turning the bag around, you can see we also have some grills, which I believe are for an option on the windows at one end of the coach, as you can see here. In fact, looking at the ends of the coaches, these are fantastic too. This is the train end of the coach, and you can see the really nice corridor connection here with loads of detail and additional painting. It's not just a crude moulding that's been glued on the end, it's fully detailed right down to the door inside. Either side of this we have those nice windows I mentioned earlier, and then underneath these is even more detail, both moulded and printed. I mean, this is so small that I can barely see it, and I can't say much about it other than it's really impressive, but hopefully you guys have a much better view than I do. We have white buffers on this model too, which is interesting, or maybe they're supposed to be silver. I'm not entirely sure there, but you can see the buffers themselves are indeed sprung, which is really nice to see. Like I've said in the past, sprung buffers don't really serve any purpose, but it's always a nice feature to have, especially on rolling stock, and at this price, I think Rapido really had no excuse not to include them. Now, at the loco end of the coach, we have a slightly different moulding for the corridor connection. This is a really impressive representation of the fabric here. I've never seen anything like that before, and there's just detail everywhere you look. The windows on this end have grills over them too, so I'm guessing these are maybe etched, but either way, they look fantastic. As you can see, we also have some nice separately fitted steps as well that lead all the way up to the roof. And speaking of the roof, this has been painted grey, which I think is another change from the original version, which was white. I quite like the grey though, and you'll notice we have really fine separately fitted handles at the end where the steps lead to. You can see the vents fitted along the length of the roof too, and as it's a clerestory roof as well, you might just notice the printed detail in the glass too. This is a fantastic detail, and it reminds me of the LNER Auto Car I reviewed earlier this year. I imagine this will look even better when the lighting is on, so let's take a look at that now. Like the Hatton's Genesis coaches, the Dynamometer Car takes its power from the track, but you don't need a decoder to turn the lights on and off. Instead, Rapido provide this magnetic wand with the coach, which, when waved over the roof, activates a switch to turn the lights on and off. Now, I think this is a much better way of doing things. It still utilises the track power, but there's no need for a decoder inside each coach, which is great, and of course that means it's easy to use on both analog and digital. Of course, it's all very well talking about it, but let's try it out in practice. You can see I have the Dynamometer Car here on the fiddle yard of my layout, and I'll take the wand and try to activate the lights. Now, you'll notice that nothing is happening, and I'm having trouble getting them to activate here. At this point, while I was filming, I thought that maybe the lights just weren't working, that my particular coach was defective or broken in some way. Of course, now I know that Rapido have issued a recall of these coaches due to issues with the electronics that control the lights, so I think it's safe to assume that this is why I couldn't get them to work. I mean, you really have to feel for Rapido. This is such a big release for them, and first the coaches get dropped off the back of a lorry when they were being delivered. Go and have a look at Rapido's video if you haven't seen that already. And now they have to deal with this. It really is a shame that the launch of such a fantastic model has been slightly overshadowed by this issue with the electronics. I do want to wish the Rapido team all the best with what I imagine is an absolute logistical nightmare, and honestly, good on them for making such a tough decision so quickly. Of course, at this point, I was going to show off some of the interior detail, which is going to be slightly tricky now, but I'll do my best here using an external light. You can just about see, though, that there is tons of detail inside the Dynamometer Car, with the various measuring and recording instruments all over the place in that central area. At each end of the coach we have seating areas as well, and it looks as if everything in the interior has been painted too, which is fantastic. I compared this to the LNER Auto Car earlier on, which also had a really well detailed interior, and again I think Rapido have certainly matched this, if not surpassed it. Obviously I'm not really able to do it justice here without the lights on, but even so I do think this is one of those models where the interior is much better seen in person than on camera. So with the Dynamometer Car already on the track, let's get it running. Again, I just want to add that this was all filmed before Rapido issued that recall, and I just thought I was going to have to send mine back at some point to get the lighting fixed. Nevertheless, I have filmed a little running session just to see how well it runs around my layout, and you can see today it's going to be hauled by the Hornby W1 Hush Hush. I actually let my channel members decide which loco they wanted to see pulling the train today for this review, and the Hush Hush is a great choice. Of course, if you also want to help decide what locos I run on the channel, you can become a member too by clicking the join button below this video, or there's a link in the description too. Back to the Dynamometer Car though, well, it looks great as part of this train, and you can see I've got it running with the Gresley teaks. Side by side you can see the colour matches the Hornby coaches really well, and it certainly doesn't look out of place as part of this set. It's a really nice smooth runner too, and it's great to have such a high quality coach to run right behind a loco. Having missed out on the Dynamometer Car the first time round, I'm very pleased that I've now got my hands on one. Although, admittedly, it is going to be short-lived as I've now arranged for this to go back to Rapido so they can sort out those issues with the lighting. It is a real shame, but I admire Rapido for making such a difficult call, but then we all know what high standards they set for themselves, so it's no real surprise. Visually though, this coach is absolutely stunning and it really looks the part. From every angle, it's incredible, and the upgrades Rapido have made from the previous version are a really nice addition and show that they're constantly looking to improve. Regarding the price, yes, it is steep, there's no denying it. However, it is the most detailed coach I've ever seen, and I do think that price is somewhat justified by the level of detail that has gone into this model. Of course, there will be those out there who don't think that price is justified, and like I said at the beginning, that's absolutely fine. Everyone is entitled to their own opinion, and probably the people who do think the price is too high were unlikely to buy it in the first place. For anyone who does want one of these coaches though, and is willing to pay that price, I don't think you'll be disappointed. It really is spectacular, and I do wish Rapido all the best with getting those issues sorted out with the lighting, mostly just because I want to have it back running on my layout as soon as possible. So that's it for today's review, and I suspect it won't be the last one of this year either, as there are so many new models due for imminent arrival. In the meantime though, thank you so much for watching, and if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!